So they get the benefits of having a data centre that has all the security aspects and resilience, but at the same time, it's local to them.
Well, hello and welcome to In Conversation With. My name is Martin Veitch, and today I'm joined by Stewart Laing. Stewart is the CEO and founder of Asanti Data Centres, a key colocation provider. Tell me a little bit about yourself and the company, if you would, Stewart.
So I've been in the IT industry now for a long time, almost 40 years now. The industry was going through another major change, and that was the growth of what we now call hyperscale data centres. So that's Microsoft or Amazon Web Services, etc. So, and the industry commentators were talking about how everything would go in that direction. I had seen many times over the years that new things come along and they take their place, but they never become the be-all and end-all. So I believe there's an opportunity to grow and develop local data centre provision. So that's really the reason why we started Asanti Data Centres. So as an idea, as a concept, it was born 15 years ago. It took almost 14 years, but we eventually, 13 years, but we started the company officially in the 23rd of November 2022, and that was with an initial acquisition of 5 data centres. We now have a 6th data centre in Livingston. So at the moment we've got 2 in the south, in Reading and Farnborough. We've got Manchester and Leeds and Hamilton, and now working in partnership with another provider actually, we now have secured data centre provision in Livingston, which will be focused on the Scottish market, clearly.
Okay, let's go right back to basics. Tell me a little bit about co-location and data centres. Why is this stuff so much in demand, and what's it really providing for your customers?
Co-location data centres are really, I suppose, part of what I call the data centre ecosystem. So they will sit often effectively between the hyperscaler data centre and the local company or organisation. Mm-hmm. So it provides local organisations with the facility that's nearby. They can access it. They can go when they want. They know where their applications are, where their servers are, where their data is. But they also get the advantage of the security, the compliance, the reliance on making sure that we have resilience in the data centres, which for organisations to do that themselves is sometimes impossible, other times expensive, and it requires a lot of resource. So they get the benefits of having a data centre that has all the security aspects and resilience, but at the same time it's local to them, and it gives them that comfort.
Yeah, a little bit like if I'm a customer of a bank and I have a retail branch on the high street near me, that kind of comfort factor, yeah?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of applications where, especially legacy applications, older applications, that ideally need to be closer to the user. We're now seeing that developing now with new applications as AI develops, and we'll no doubt discuss that at some stage. But the AI element will develop new applications that again will come closer to the user again. So not distributed as far as a hyperscale data center, which can be anywhere, wherever in the world, effectively, but actually local to the user.
Yeah, it seems to me that one of the major trends of the last 20 or 30 years is for CIOs to be able to take that data out of house, not have to manage the data center internally, and concentrate more on value-added, creative, innovative IT. Do you see that as a trend yourself?
Absolutely. I actually spent a good number of years before Asanti started working with organisations doing exactly that. Organisations realising that IT is not necessarily what they do. They sell a product or they manufacture a product or a service, but they're not IT people. And to have your own IT skills internally can be expensive, but also difficult to get. There is a growing challenge in resource, actually, in skill sets. I started in the IT industry, I was one of the young people. Now I'm not, but what we're seeing is a there hasn't been a lot of new people coming into the industry over the last number of years, surprisingly, and that creates challenges and issues as well.
Yeah, so the real appeal is I can stick to my knitting, as it were, focus on the business, focus on adding value with digital and technological capabilities, and not have to worry about the chores and the admin, et cetera, et cetera.
Absolutely, and that is definitely a growing trend, a growing requirement, which is driving, from a Asanti perspective, it's great because it is driving the growth in that space.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned having these local provisions. Obviously, people tuning into this, they're going to be highly familiar with AWS and Microsoft and Google with these epic data centers. You're really providing something on a much smaller scale.
Yes, we are. Our data centres, I say, they're deliberately aimed at the local market, so they're never going to be huge campuses, sort of thing. You would actually rather have multiple campuses than have one extremely large one, for the exact reasons I'm saying, that we want to have that distributed capability around the UK that allows people to have access to data centre services where they want it, rather than us saying, well, it has to be in the south of England or it has to be in the north of Scotland. Actually, it can be wherever you want it to be within a reasonable distance.
So what you're doing is very distinct, isn't it, from the Microsofts, the Googles, the AWSs of this world?
Yes. As a colocation data centre provider, I see us as part of what I refer to as the data centre ecosystem. So at one end of the scale you have the AWSs, the Microsofts, etc. At the other end you've got the user, I suppose the end user, and we sit somewhere in the middle. But we're also conscious that as a colocation provider, what we're providing, what our expertise is in, is operating the data centre itself, and all the things that means around resilience and security, etc. Where we have focused is really in developing a partner channel. So we work with a small number of managed service providers, network providers, because what we see in the industry now is a move towards something called a hybrid cloud. Mm-hmm. Hybrid cloud is a combination of all of the things we've done for the years. So it'll always be a mix of potentially on-premise, i.e. with the customer, in a colocation data center provider, and also with a hyperscaler. Because the big move now is organizations are much smarter in terms of their requirements now. And what we're actually trying to encourage organizations to do is take a real close look at what you actually need, then decide what your IT strategy, data center strategy is, or often referred to as your cloud strategy. Because a cloud strategy can be a combination of all of those. So we work very closely with partners who have got the expertise to actually deliver those services in addition to what we provide as a colocation provider. We want to focus on doing what we do and do it extremely well. That's our key focus. And let other organisations, the partners, then deliver what they're very good at. So making sure we're delivering expertise to what actually the customer's requiring and what they're actually looking for. But that starts with an organisation being able to understand what they actually need as a business, and then matching their strategy to that.
Yeah, which sounds like common sense, but we had this funny phenomenon, didn't we, about 10 or 15 years ago, where companies said, oh, we're cloud first, or CIOs said, we're cloud first, and really went for it, took everything away from the data center, tried to go direct to these hyperscale providers. Mm-hmm. And now it seems to me we've retrenched a little bit, and it's much more of that, I guess the fashionable term now is hybrid.
I suppose when you're in the industry as long as I have, you see these things happen often. And I can go back many years and the same things happened, where something new comes along, and then you have a situation where the industry commentators will pick it up, the press will pick it up, and before you know it, you've got this hype almost that starts to happen. And they say it's happened. I was a Unix engineer many years ago, and I can remember the Unix being the answer to everybody's requirements forever. Right? Guess what? It had its place for a long, long time. And it's the same exactly the same things happened with the public cloud aspect of it. Because what people did was they tied cloud strategy to public cloud. Public cloud is only a part of a cloud strategy. But you're absolutely right, there was this huge rush to public cloud. Often advice was given by the public cloud providers. Does that make sense?
They would say that, wouldn't they? Yeah,
Correct.
absolutely.
So that was often what happened. So organisations that say that this was the big new thing, as I said earlier, because I've been around so long and I saw these things happen, that was why, as I said earlier, where the opportunity, I believe, came for us to create Asanti, to provide the services that would be required at some point. And I suppose we're now very much in that space now. And if you go in and do a search online, you will find numerous examples now of organisations who are now starting to realise that actually public cloud wasn't the answer to everything. It was the answer to some things, and it always will be. It'll still be a huge part of our industry going forward. However, there's a lot of those elements now that they're starting to realise that actually that probably wasn't the best thing to do. We did a survey. We had a survey created last year. We didn't do it. We had it published, carried out last year. We spoke to 100 senior executives of a number of large organisations around the UK. 98% of them, I was shocked at that stat, if I'm being honest, but 98% said if they were doing it again, they would do it differently, or they would be bringing stuff back. And they're actually bringing stuff back now from the cloud. So as I say, in this, I knew it was happening. I was genuinely surprised to see the scale of the response in terms of the number of organisations that were now saying actually it wasn't the right thing. Unfortunately, there's still a lot going on out there, especially in public sector.
Yeah.
Huge amount in public sector who are still saying, oh, we've got a cloud first strategy, but they're still tying that to public cloud, which hopefully we'll see a change in that, because if, and not just from an Asanti perspective, but actually from their perspective, that they take the time to understand what they really need before they jump.
Well, that trend, some people call it repatriation, don't they, or data repatriation.
Yes.
And they're actually moving away from cloud where it makes sense, at least. And it seems to me that, this is good, logical stuff. Yeah. Horses for courses, pragmatic approach.
Yeah, absolutely. So that is the new phrase that's around. But you're right, it does mean that, as I say, it really is summing up the fact that you have these organisations now understanding actually what we need is what's best for us. Not what's best for the provider, whether it's a managed service provider or a colo provider or a Azure or whatever. It's about what's best for the customer, and that's really our focus. I've tried to build a business. I am trying to build a business based on that principle. It's something going back over many years that I was always focused on building customer excellence into what we did. What we do, and that's exactly where we want to take Asanti. Part of the reason why we don't have all the skill sets. Let's deliver excellence in what we do, and then work with the partners to provide the customer what they actually need, rather than what they're told they need.
Absolutely. Now, Stewart, you mentioned the fashion for public cloud and further back, Unix. The current big mania, of course, is artificial intelligence. Where does AI sit in terms of colocation, cloud, data centres?
That's a massive question, and to a certain extent, I'm still asking it as well. I've spent the last 18 months focused quite a bit, actually, in trying to understand more about the industry, more about what it actually means for the data center industry. But AI also has different factors to it. So you have and I'm not an expert by any means, you have the learning module. So the bit where you see the industry nowadays, what they call GPUs, they're super powerful computers. And those are the devices that they use to take all the data and process that and create these amazing technologies. And it is going to be amazing to see where it goes and what it does. But that takes a huge amount of power. So an average data center rack, if you built a data center, which most of them in the UK are, you built a data center 20 years ago or 15 years ago, you built a data center for 4 kilowatts. So that's a couple of kettles. Right? AI technologies needs 100 kilowatts. 50 kettles in the same space. So how do you power that? How do you cool that? And that's creating lots of challenges for the industry right now. But also the cost of power in the UK is very expensive. So we have, last year we saw 3 opportunities that we were directly involved in bidding for. And all of it went abroad. It didn't stay in the UK. And that just came down to the cost of actual power, because you're using so much of it. Because you can use a lot of power in a very small space when it starts at AI. However, there's another aspect of AI, which is what comes out the other end of that whole process, is applications. Applications don't need that, don't necessarily need that amount of power or that amount of computing power. So therefore, does that mean, and I'm still asking these questions, does that mean we come back to normal server and storage technologies that exist? I wouldn't name manufacturers, but we all know who they are, or the main ones. So it doesn't mean we come back to that again for the applications. And then where do those applications go? Well, what I am being told and what I am learning is that those applications will go closer to the user in a lot of cases. As I say, it's going to be incredible just to see, or fascinating to see where all this goes. But there's still a lot of questions unanswered. There's a lot of challenges for the data center industry, especially in the UK, because realistically, if you're going to have 100 kilowatt racks plus going forward, you're going to have to build something very specific for it. You can't do that in existing, what would a class as traditional data centre, or in any data centres in the UK. So they have to do something new to accommodate that. And that can be a challenge in a lot of data centres. If you've got a data centre that's up and running and it's full, the last thing you want to be doing is starting to mess around with your power or your systems. You have to make sure that that's there and it's resilient and it's not going to impact any customers. So you have to be able to do it off to one side where you're not going to impact that. And we're looking at that in a couple of our data centres, not on a huge scale for AI, but we are looking at it in terms of how could we do that, or even do we right now? Because if the cost of power stays where it is, the chances are that where people are looking to use a lot of power, unless they have to be in the UK, they're potentially going to go somewhere else.
Absolutely, and that raises a lot of other questions as well, more questions than answers, like the old song, isn't it?
Yeah.
In the sense that, are they going to be subject to different legislation about data protection and so on, about data sovereignty?
Yeah.
These are all big challenges.
Yeah, there's a lot going on in that space as well right now, because some you may have saw it in the press, but data centres under the new existing UK government have now been classified as critical national infrastructure. We, again, don't really know what that means yet. I've been to 2 of the sessions so far. It's very, very early days. I do believe it will be advantageous for the industry going forward. Our industry isn't, it's not really regulated as such. It's sort of self-regulated. I think there'll be an element of that coming in. That's what I'm expecting. But it also raises the awareness in the status of data centres around the UK as well. But we are certainly seeing. We don't really know what all the changes will be there yet. But there's meetings every 3 months now, run by the government, which I now attend, along with probably every other data centre company in the UK, because we want to see where that's going to go. It's ready in Europe, so there's new legislation that's come out in Europe. So I suppose in some ways we're just still kind of waiting to see what that really means for data centres.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, the way I see it is that in the same way that CIOs go to a data centre colocation provider for help with the nuts and bolts and the day-to-day operations of managing IT and data centre services, now they're going to have to also be looking to the data centre partners for help with compliance, with sustainability, and all of these highly complicated and often changing landscapes.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that was interesting is that the new CNI and whatever and compliance set that comes with that may actually go beyond the likes of ourselves. It could go as far as organisations in-house data centres. Depends on the scale of them. again, they've come up with an initial definition at the moment of what that is. It's not huge in terms of sort, but it's related to power usage. So there will be some organisations who potentially will end up as part of this, and they'll also have to look at the various information that we're going to have to feed back as part of being part of the critical national infrastructure now.
So, Stewart, why did you create Asanti? Was there something going on in the business that you felt left a space for you?
Yeah, I just believed that we were never going to be just hyperscale. And then, therefore, what did that actually mean? And that combined with something we talked about earlier on, about CEOs, COOs wanting to know where things were and that comfort element. So it was really a combination of where I saw the industry going, but also what I'd experienced over many years, just working closely with those type of organisations or those type of people, and knowing how they think and what they really wanted.
You had a gripe with them overselling, or?
Well, it was interesting because having spent most of my life in the IT industry as a service provider, I actually crossed over the fence, as I would call it, and I was working in organisations. So I was actually seeing the industry from the outside. And to be totally honest, I was not overly impressed at times by what I saw. With one organisation, we did a questionnaire, and we sent the questionnaire out for a particular service. And I was the person getting the responses. And having been in the industry for so long, I was watching some of these responses, and I'm thinking, really? So I think for me, one of our hugely important things is openness. And I'm not saying people are dishonest, that would be wrong to say that, but I think accuracy and openness, and having the ability to engage with customers on that basis. We basically, what was the old advert? It says what it's, what's the,
That's what it says on the tin.
That's what it says in the tin. Exactly that. That we're not in any way misleading anyone. That we are upfront in what we do. And you would see it even in a play on words. I don't like a play on words. Let's just state what it is, sort of thing, so that people are clear in terms of where. And that's really what I want to do. That's what I want to bring to the industry. I'm not saying we're the only people doing it. We're not. But it was just something that I saw firsthand. It disappointed me, I suppose.
Tell me about the future. What's going to happen next for Asanti and for the broader business?
I just think it's a really exciting time in the industry. There is a lot of unknowns. AI is fascinating, and where that takes us, only time will tell. As Asanti, our ambition and our plan is to grow our business, further acquisitions, but also new builds potentially. So as we see the growth and the expansion of local data centres, there's a lot of areas in the UK where there isn't any. So we'll look at that very closely in terms of the geographical spread. Ideally, we try and pair our data centres up. So Reading and Farnborough we see as a pair of data centres, Manchester, Leeds. And that's partly down to the services you can then provide, so you can give customers that resilience within the data centre, but additional resilience by using
DR and backup,
yes,
etc.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we look at that very closely. But yeah, we see an exciting future. We see further acquisitions, as I said, and that's something we're constantly looking at.
You're going to want to put the flags on the map all over the UK. Is that right?
Yes. And there is a map actually. We know where the gaps are already. As I said, we're south of London. We're in the north of England. We're in Scotland. The Midlands is still areas that we don't have anything at this point in time. So yeah, I think it's a really exciting future, and I do think the whole AI aspect is certainly going to play a huge part in that. The growth of data is also is a massive aspect to this,
right? Because
it doesn't really get talked about it much. But 3 or 4 years ago, I was at I think it was Data Centre Dynamics were all online. It was during COVID times. There was this incredible presentation that I found it incredible, because actually what they presented was this. I mentioned earlier on about at one extreme you've got the hyperscale size data center providers. At the other end you've got the local, your organisation, companies, and they had a box in the middle on the screen. And I was sending messages to some of the team to say, somebody's about to put Asanti's data center strategy on a screen. Mm-hmm. And they did, because they come up and said, so in the middle here is your local data center providers, not just Asanti, but that's so. And that was actually being driven by the growth of data and the impact that was having on internet traffic. So the internet works at the speed of light. You know that's as fast as we can go. We can't go any faster. So there is a limitation. I'm not a network specialist by any means, but listening to these guys was very, very interesting. And they were saying in the long term, actually, we couldn't sustain the growth of data. So the way you do that is you take it local.
Yeah.
So you start driving more stuff local that you can, and only the stuff that you need to then goes out in terms of the big wide world, as I would basically call it, you know. So we're definitely going to see a huge, I believe we're going to see a huge increase, and therefore are really exciting times for Asanti going forward.
Well, it's phenomenal, isn't it? I mean, there's that mind-boggling statistic that the amount of data being created is every 2 years exceeds the whole history, the whole accretion of data in all of history. And you do feel it, don't you, with AI, that could even accelerate further. And that's going to be very tough for CIOs to manage and for organizations to behave in a responsible manner and govern the data, hence the appeal of third parties like Asanti.
Absolutely. As I say, I think having been in the industry for over 30 years, it's actually incredible when you think back, even over a small number of years, and how things have changed. I was a Unix technical guy, and within 2 years of actually stopping doing that, all of my skill sets were obsolete. So it just shows you how fast the industry moves and how, and it's I can't keep up with it, that's for sure. There are obviously people who can, but yeah, it just the growth is phenomenal, and I can't comprehend the fact that I remember reading that article and go, what? So in all the years previously, and we've now just created more in the last 2 years than we'd ever had in history.
Absolutely.
It's a phenomenal statistic and almost impossible to comprehend. But I absolutely agree it's going to continue.
Well, Stewart, that's about all we've got time for. I know we could sit here and yabber on for a lot longer. There's so much going on in this business. But that's all we've got time for today in a conversation with. And we look forward to seeing you next time for our next podcast. Thanks so much.